Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. Bobby Kennedy Jr. on the line with us. RingofFireRadio.com, the website. The environmentalist, attorney, and author. His latest book, Thimerosal. Let the science speak. And, Bobby, a quick recap of what we've been talking about here?
A 16-year veteran researcher and senior scientist at CDC has now gone whistleblower and asked for protection under the federal whistleblower statute, saying that he deceived the public and under orders from CDC and buried data, damning data about the toxicity of thimerosal and its impacts on human beings. When he published he's the author of 2 of the 3 studies that CDC has pointed to in order to exculpate thimerosal from this epidemic of neurological disorders in American children. And the first study was already discredited, the Verstraeten study, by its own author. He is now coming out and saying those studies were tampered with and are not valid.
Right. And once again, this is not an indictment of vaccines. This is an indictment of a mercury-based preservative put in vaccines. And
Exactly. And it's not in all vaccines, but it is in the flu vaccine. And people who get the flu vaccine should definitely be asking for the thimerosal-free version. In fact, any vaccine that you get, you should always check whether it's thimerosal-free. Every vaccine that's made, there is a thimerosal-free version of it. Some of those have trace amounts of thimerosal, but you're not getting the huge bolus doses of, 12 or 25 micrograms that you would get from the flu vaccine.
Right. Okay, so let's pick up some calls on this. Dixie in Nehalem, Oregon. Am I saying that right, Dixie?
Yes, Nehalem, Oregon.
You're on the air with Bobby.
Yes. Hello, Tom, and hello, Mr. Kennedy. You wanted to talk about mercury, so I have this little article here. There's other things I have to say, but I'll stick to mercury. I'll read it to you just a little bit. It says, contrary to the assertions of Oz, Hyman, and Kennedy, is that you?
Yes.
Is that Kennedy? Thimerosal has not been removed from childhood vaccinations. It's still there. The FDA changed the rules so vaccine manufacturers do not have to include thimerosal on the label as an ingredient unless it is used as a preservative. According to the FDA, if thimerosal is used in the manufacturing process but it is not used as a preservative, the vaccine can be labeled thimerosal-free when that is not the case.
That's what the earlier caller was pointing out, is that some of the vaccines have trace amounts of thimerosal in them, maybe 1 microgram or less. But the big bolus doses have definitely been taken out of the vaccines, out of the pediatric vaccines. The big, like the 12 and 25 micrograms that were in the hepatitis B vaccine and the rest of the pediatric vaccine schedule has been removed. But there are, what she's saying is correct, there are still very, very small amounts, trace amounts of thimerosal in some of the other vaccines.
Johnny in Lamarck, Texas. You're on the air with Bobby Kennedy.
An honor to talk to you both. As usual, Tom, good show.
Thank you.
You answered part of my question earlier. It had to do with why not install a refrigeration protocol for some vaccines, if not all vaccines. But the single dose, I guess, is the way to go. And on the single dose, for people who are senior citizens on Medicare, are they required to take what they're given, or can they ask for a single dose, even if it's at a slightly higher price? And number 2, part 2 of my question, can we remediate heavy mercury in human beings with chelation therapy, either the home version or the doctor office visit with the IV version of chelation therapy?
There are many, many anecdotal instances of people, in fact, Trace Amounts, the movie I was talking about, is about a guy who got severe mercury poisoning and autism-like symptoms when he was 29 years old from a tetanus vaccine, and then got rid of it had a complete recovery from chelation. There are many, and there are children in that movie that also, where they show before and afters, where they before and after chelation. I had a friend who was the COO of one of the biggest engineering companies in the country, who I advised to get, who had a severely autistic son who could not speak, and the doctors told him he would never be able to speak again. I advised him to get chelation, and Dr. Hyman set him up with a physician who could do it. It takes sometimes years to completely chelate them, but that child has had a full recovery. And I was at a wedding this weekend, and I ran into this engineer, and he told me that his son is now in college, living on his own, and has a 4.1 average. And there are many, many anecdotal stories like that, but there hasn't been any study, any peer-reviewed scientific study of children. I don't believe it will work for, by any means, all autistic kids, but it does seem to have really good effects on some of them and miraculous impacts on a few. Unfortunately, the CDC won't study this, and the FDA won't fund any studies of it. So that whole area has been kind of shut down. We really should be studying it, but nobody is studying it because of the root denial that that mercury has anything to do with these neurological
Right. If you're claiming there's no problem, then you don't research the cure. It's remarkable. Lisa in Wisconsin, listening to WCPT. I can't pronounce the name of your city. Lisa, what is it?
Economawalk.
Okay, you're on the air with Bobby.
Hi, Mr. Kennedy. I appreciate you coming on the program. I wanted to let you know I have one of these autistic kids, and we had actually filed our claim with the Vaccine Compensation Fund within the 3-year period, the 3-year window, back in 2001. Our son was born in 1998. And because, we desperately wanted to find out what had happened to him, and we had an infant that was younger than him, and we wanted to make sure there was there wasn't going to be any overlap. We had done extensive genetic testing. We took our son to the Cleveland Clinic and had a mitochondrial biopsy. And anyway, after the Supreme Court of the United States basically said that manufacturers are not liable for any vaccine, any deaths or damages due to vaccines. Our case, we were contacted by our attorney about a year and a half ago, who sent us a letter stating that there was no point in going on with the Vaccine Compensation Fund, and she requested that we drop our case. So we signed off on the letter and sent it back. Is there anything that can be done now that all of this is starting to come back out again? Is there anything that we can do? Because we did have a case that sat in the courts for over 10 years.
I don't know. I know there's a terrific vaccine attorney called Bob Krakow who's in New York, Krakow, and he specializes in the vaccine courts. The vaccine court is a kangaroo court. It's really a very strange hybrid. There's no discovery allowed. The compensation, the attorney's fees are severely limited, so you're not getting involvement of the bar. So they've disabled essentially the bar, because you can't sue the vaccine makers. They're completely immune, and the money is coming from this, from the federal government, from taxpayers. So it's not a satisfactory process to the parents who have vaccine injured children, and that's really all what I would say is that you should continue to consult maybe some other attorneys, but it has been a very, very tough process. It's odd too, Tom. I would say this: the Seventh Amendment says that no American shall be deprived the right of a jury trial, for matters that involve more than $25 in controversy. So, the Supreme Court, nevertheless, allowed these vaccine court legislation to occur, even though there's no jury. You're with a government attorney, a government judge, and no discovery. You can't sue the guy who hurt you. And it's a very, very strange subversion of our constitutional right to jury trial. And I think it's very bad for the program, because the vaccine program because it's given an immunity that has put all of these companies beyond any kind of accountability. Normally you'd have a check and balance where you'd have the plaintiff's bar who would say, wait a second, you shouldn't be putting aluminum, you shouldn't be in these vaccines. You can do single dose. Why are you doing the multiple dose when it's potentially causing these injuries? And sue them, and they would quickly stop doing that and look for safer methods of doing it. And you'd have a much more transparent process. But
are they using Thimerosal because it's cheap?
Yeah, it's cheaper. The multi-dose vials are cheaper than the single-dose vials.
But why not use something less toxic than Thimerosal as a preservative?
Well, there are alternatives for them. But, the best thing to do would be just to not put anything more in the vaccines and to use single dose.
Right, yeah. Purify the stuff.
It works. They did it with all the pediatric vaccines, Tom, so nobody's arguing that it can't be done.
Right. Okay.
One last thing I'd say is that we took it out in America, but we're still giving this to children all over the world in all their pediatric vaccines.
Oh, my God. Bobby Kennedy Jr., Ring of Fire Radio. You can find the article. Check it out. We'll be back.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit thomhartmann.com for audio and video archives.
Ringoffireradio.com. Bobby's new article is up there. There's a link to it over at thomhartmann.com. And his book, Thimerosal, Let the Science Speak. Bobby, you're still with us?
Yeah.
Okay, great. We've got
Tom,
a bunch.
Thanks so much for doing that.
Oh, my pleasure. We've got some Free Speech TV callers who are on the air here who have questions for you, and then in 4 minutes we've got to bail and pick up Talk Radio News. But you want to take a couple more calls here from Free Speech TV viewers? Okay, great. Esteban in Marshall, Virginia, watching Free Speech TV on the Dish Network. You're on the air with Bobby Kennedy.
Hello, Tom and Bobby. I'm wondering if Bobby knows of any safety issues with the metal that's in dental fillings.
The metal, which is in, there's mercury in many dental fillings, and it off gases, particularly when you drink a hot drink like coffee. So, and it's the single largest deposits of mercury in America. I understand are the mercury in people's fillings. A few years ago, I had high mercury levels, and they were causing me that were 10 times what EPA considers safe. And they were causing me some impacts, not major impacts like I've seen with people who are very sensitive to it, which I'm not. But my levels were so high, I was getting some impacts from them, and I had my mercury fillings removed. Now,
same here.
It's against the law in most states for a dentist to tell you that your mercury-based fillings may be causing some problems. They'll lose their license if they tell you that. It's a very odd law. It seems to again abridge some constitutional rights. But if you look it up, you'll find that it exists in virtually every state.
Amazing.
So your dentist will never tell you to remove your fillings because he'll lose his license if he does it. Yeah. But particularly if you have children, you should make sure that when their teeth get filled, if they get cavities, that they're using non-mercury alternatives, which are out there.
Yeah, I had all the mercury taken out of my mouth maybe 15 years ago, and I swear I noticed a big difference. But again, there's placebo effect. One never knows, but it was. Yeah. Lawrence in Berkeley. We still have about a minute and a half here, Lawrence. A quick one for Bobby?
Yes. Sure. Yeah, one of the big problems is that drug companies won't do the kind of basic research that is needed unless it's going to make them a huge profit with a profitable product. And at the same time, they're trying, through the Republicans, to cut down the budget of the National Institutes for Health and the CDC that do that research. And that's, to go from vaccines to antibiotics, we're losing our antibiotics because they're becoming immune.
Right. This is a big problem. Lawrence, we have only 40 seconds left. Let's let Bobby respond.
Well, that's a whole other issue that I'm not really an expert on. So, I don't think I should really comment on it because my expertise is mercury, and that in terms of the other vaccines and the other aspects of medicine, I just haven't done the kind of research to answer that question.
Well, I think his point was that that nobody's doing that basic research that might reveal something like this. Nobody's funding it.
Clearly right on the issues. For example, Monsanto. One of the other culprits in these neurological epidemics that we're having has been Roundup and the material in that. And there's nobody out there who's going to research that.
Yeah, you're right. Bobby, you are doing God's work. Thanks so much for being with us today.
Thanks for having me, Tom.
Thank you.
Always great talking with you.
There's always an open door here.